Welcome to the Why Did I Get Cancer podcast. I'm Deborah Herlax-Enos, a small-town girl turned TV nutritionist and healthy living expert. I design health programs for the average guy or gal, including those average guys named Metallica. On September 1st, 2020, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I asked every oncologist the same question, why did I get cancer? But none of my doctors had good answers for me. I wanted answers, and that's why I started this podcast. I want to help you to lower your cancer risk and provide self-care tips for those in the battle. I'm getting answers, and I want to share them with you. I had such an interesting takeaway with my guest today, the founder of ButcherBox, Mike Salguero. We had a conversation about why did he start this company, a home delivery service of meat, which, might be kind of a, random, interesting business. Basically, his wife was ill. They wanted to put her on an anti-inflammatory diet that included grass-fed beef, and he couldn't find any. So he ended up finding a farmer who was willing to sell him a cow. He met the guy in the parking lot and bought this cow, and he had so much that they couldn't even store it. They couldn't get through it in a year. So Mike ended up selling it to some of his friends. His friends said, dude, this is amazing. Can you just figure out how to start a business where you sell us this really high quality meat? And that's how ButcherBox was born. Give today's episode a listen to find out why grass-fed beef can be so good for your body. Mike and I also talked about the importance of high-quality protein, and that if you're eating really good protein, it can almost end up being a side dish. You got to listen to today's episode to find out more. Well, good morning, Mike Salguero, founder of ButcherBox, sponsor of my podcast. I look forward to that box every month.
So excited to be here. Great to meet you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'm a former farmer, and I care about where my food comes from. So when I first heard about ButcherBox, I was very intrigued.
Yeah. So we started the business in 2015 and was solving a similar problem. My wife has a thyroid condition, an autoimmune disease, and we were cleaning up our diet and looking at different elimination diets and different ways to kind of eat more healthy.
Right.
And pretty much every diet that we followed said, eat grass-fed beef. And we couldn't find a good resource for it. And one thing led to another. And I ended up starting ButcherBox to solve that problem. And then as I got more into meat, I realized that the same thing that led me to grass-fed beef, where I wanted an animal that wasn't fed antibiotics and hormones and was treated with dignity and respect and regenerated the environment, that was true across all species, that it was really hard to find pork or chicken or seafood or bison or lamb or any of the other species. It just was really hard to find product where the customer cared about the same things I cared about: how the animal was treated and the health of the animal and how the environment was treated and where they grew up. And so we started a company to solve that problem.
And those are the questions that I'm concerned about as well as a former farmer. One thing we always knew is you don't name your animals because they were eventually going to end up on your plate. But I think one of the things I'm most intrigued about is your why, because necessity is the mother of invention. So it sounds like you and your wife were just kind of at a dead end to find her a healing diet.
Yeah. We lived in downtown Boston. So we're not talking about like we lived in kind of the middle of nowhere.
Right.
And we lived in downtown Boston. There was a grocery store in downtown Boston. That grocery store had grass-fed ground beef, but that was it. And I'm, I like food. I like to cook. And so I wanted more variety. I wanted ribeyes. I wanted short ribs. I wanted chuck roast. I wanted to play around with grass-fed beef, and I couldn't figure out how to do that. And so I ended up purchasing from a farmer. We met in a parking lot, which is actually technically illegal, and I bought a half a cow off of him. And then that was too much meat for me. So I ended up selling it to my friends. And that was the kind of the impetus. One of my friends was like, this would be so much easier if it was delivered to my house. And I was like, Yeah, I was like, okay, I could probably try to do that. Yeah, one thing led to another. And, we've never strayed from that original purpose of, we have a mission of transforming meat, which means respecting the animal, the farmer, the environment, the workers in the supply chain, and ultimately providing a better product for the customer. But that mission is in service of our customer, in service of our purpose. And the purpose, the why behind what we do is we want to help people eat better. Because the diet in this country, which I know you talk a lot about, the diet in this country is making people sick. And there's much better solutions out there, and there's much better food out there for people. And oftentimes that food is inaccessible, whether that's you want to eat this way, but you go to your local grocery store and they don't have this type of meat, or you want to eat this way and you can't prioritize it because you have other bills to pay. And both of which I believe is solvable if you have an eye towards scale and efficiency, and have an eye towards, skipping the grocery store and delivering directly to consumers across this country.
Right. And then, of course, the American farmer makes less than $50,000 a year on average for small family farms. And so then you're also giving an opportunity to them to really make a living wage and support their families.
That's right. Farms in this country are closing at all-time highs right now, which people don't really know a lot about. It's interesting. People don't really know much about the source of their food.
That's so true. I rail on, please support your farmers. Go to your farmers market every weekend, rain or shine. I live in Seattle. It rains 9 months a year here. And I go every weekend, even if I don't want to go, because I know what it's like to be a farmer.
Yeah. And, it's really across species. So one of the things I love about my job is I get to really go super deep into the rabbit hole of each species. So I could talk to you for an hour straight about salmon and all the things that are happening in salmon and what are the challenges and whatnot, or pork or chicken or beef. And I just love that ability to go and build authentic relationships with the providers. And really understand it. And there always are trade-offs. It's never as easy as it might seem. And so what we're trying to do is balance the trade-offs and provide the best possible quality to our customer to help them eat better. And in the meantime, trying to move the industry towards something that's more sustainable, because meat in the aggregate right now is not a sustainable thing. And it's the animals are suffering, the environment is suffering, the customer's getting an inferior product, and there's a lot more that can be done. And we're hoping to use this company and this platform to do that.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk a little bit about animal husbandry, which is basically, how the animal is treated beginning to end. And I've read some articles and talked to some ranchers that when the animal is harvested, we'll use that kind of languaging, and it's in a really high stress situation, the animal emits a lot of cortisol and stress hormones, which can actually change the texture of the meat. So people don't even maybe notice because they're just used to eating that commercial farm lot animal.
Yeah. So the pH balance can change in the animal if it is stressed. And so what you want to do is find an environment, ultimately eating meat requires the death of the animal, right? So no matter what, this animal that you're eating is going to have been killed. That's a sad reality of eating meat. And so what you want to do is make sure that you're working with facilities that are doing that in the most humane way possible, and really thinking through all the different steps of keeping that during the harvest process, keeping the animal as calm as possible, because it does have a huge impact on the meat. The pH balance can change, which can affect flavor. Mm-hmm. And then obviously there's kind of the ethical side of if the animal is going to be put to death, let's at least make it as calm as possible. I don't know. Have you ever heard of Temple Grandin? I don't know if you've heard of that woman.
Yes, I have.
Yeah, super fascinating. She's autistic and an empath, and a lot of plants in this country bring her into the plant, and she walks on all fours as if she is a cow, and is like, oh, that flag right there is flapping in the breeze and that's really distracting me. And they're like, okay, take down the flag. Or like, I can see the person over there and that's distracting me. And they basically have her go through to have the best possible experience. And people care about that stuff at certain places. Yeah.
That's a key point, Mike. At certain places, people care about those things. But I think people probably think, well, sure, that sounds great, but it's going to be incredibly expensive. And you know what? The bottom line is it's actually not.
It can be if you are dealing in a system that's less efficient. But what I like to say is that most of meat in this country, like it all kind of starts out the same. It starts out in a similar fashion. You're just diverting that meat towards being raised differently. You have to build this. I think a lot of people's approach in the past to grass-fed beef, let's say, is either one, use a dairy cow, which has a completely different flavor. And then people are like, I don't like grass-fed beef. I tried it. I didn't like it.
Right. It's gamey or whatever.
It's gamey.
They want to
it's
say.
tough.
Yeah.
It's and it's like, well, that was a dairy cow. That wasn't like something that was raised for meat. So that's like one option or one way that people kind of go. And then the second is so basically cows all start out the same. First 18 months, cows all start out the same, but then 98% of them go to a feedlot. Only 2% stay on grass. And so what we're trying to do is make commitments to farmers to keep the animal eating grass. Because first 6 months is cow calf, so it's a cow and its mother. The next year is just out eating grass. And so there's this real opportunity to just say, like, just keep it eating grass, which seems super simple, but the whole system is built for feedlots.
It really is. Yeah.
Whether it's the loans that you're getting to raise the animals, there's just a lot of kind of like feedlot influence on the industry.
And I'd love to talk a little bit about grass versus corn, because I think about going out and buying a steak. And it's been a few years since I've seen this on menus, but high-end steakhouses used to proudly proclaim corn-fed, corn-fed ribeye, which, I mean, I love a good ribeye. And now I don't see that on menus as much anymore. Can you tell us the difference between corn-fed?
Sure. So a cow is a ruminant. So they are made to graze and to eat grass. And so the cow's stomach, the cow, like just basically everything about the cow is made to be out in a field eating grass. What has happened in this country, for a whole host of reasons, including that land is expensive and grass is not as plentiful, a solution has been to grow corn on an acre of land or many acres of land, and then bring that to a feeding operation where the cows go and eat corn and grain and put on weight in that last 6 months. And, it's not a good diet for the cow. It's not what the cow was built for. It also tends to be done in these confined feeding operations because it's much more efficient. So there are some cows that are like fed corn out in a field, which I think is much better. But for the most part, it's a very confined feeding operation. No more grass. It's just mud. Tractor just brings corn down a line and just sprays it into troughs, and the cows are just eating corn and grain all day long. And all of that has to do with the grading system. So if you think about the grading in this country, it's this grading of choice, prime, select. That's how we think about the quality of steak. What that means in actual terms is when you cut the animal in half and you look at the ribeye it's how much marble is on that ribeye.
So it's the fat.
And so the fat marbling of the ribeye. And so if you are trying to get the highest quote unquote quality, as defined by Choice Prime Select, you want to get the animal as fat as possible, as quickly as possible, which incentivizes you to use grains. And cows are very much like humans. If you just like live on a whole bunch of corn and candy, Choice Prime Select, one of the challenges of doing grass-fed beef in the United States is that like that is the ranking system that still exists for grass-fed beef that you're pulling out, Choice Prime Select. And it's like, well, that's not really like the only determinant of quality is like how fat did we get the animal, right? So if you then move to a grass-fed system where the animal is eating grass, it's very hard to hit the same choice prime select as it is in a feedlot. I think like this is where I talk about like the United States as it relates to grass-fed beef is going to require a tremendous amount of disruption in order to have grass-fed beef be like the standard.
You're right. So much disruption. Yeah.
So much disruption. And we do some of that now. And we are, I guess, unapologetic about this. We also source from Australia because the system is much more robust. And that's just the sad reality of, where we're at. I would love to be fully domestic, but we don't. There aren't enough good programs out there for us to be fully domestic.
Okay. Are programs like that possible in the U.S.? To be like the Australian model?
It's going to need to be different. So when you go to Australia and you go to a grass-fed operation, there's so much land in Australia. It's literally like, hop in the Jeep, we're going to go find the cows. And they don't know where the cows are. And many of these cows, they haven't even seen them in 2 years.
Oh, that's cool.
Like they have an RFID tag on them so they don't lose them. But they have such a large ranch, which they call a station, that like the cows are just kind of like out living their life and eating grass, which is what I believe is like what people want.
That's cool, Mike. Yeah.
It's what we used to have. Right. It's what cows were made for.
Right.
It's, it's kind of like the bison, the great bison of the plains. Like it is truly a ruminant hanging out and eating grass. In this country, that doesn't really exist. Now, it could if the federal government would let us use BLM land. It could if large ranches, had the proper like incentives to do grass-fed. It's possible, but it really is going to like take a lifetime. My whole thing is like, I started this business 8 years ago. It took off and it grew way faster than we ever expected. I never expected to be running a business this big. And now that I am, people are like, oh, you should sell. And I'm like, well, maybe. But I mean, I kind of feel like this might be my life's work, like changing the meat system in this country, which is in desperate need of changes.
Which is desperate for, right. We both said desperate at the same time. Right. So you haven't really finished being a disruptor yet.
No, I think we're just getting started.
I think you are too. And so if we just compared as a nutritionist, I know that grass is one of the healthiest foods on the planet. As a nutritionist, I also know that genetically modified corn, which is basically the only corn we have in the US, is one of the worst foods on the planet. So you got a cow over here eating corn. You got a cow in Australia eating grass-fed, and a few cows, of course, in the US, mainly in California, correct?
California's big, although they've gone through a drought.
That's
so
true.
The South is big as well. Missouri, Florida.
Right.
Yeah. But like most of the cows kind of pre-feedlot are actually coming from South Dakota, North Dakota, Minnesota, that area of the world.
But the meat will be different. The meat will have a different nutrient profile in the cow, depending on what it's fed, just like we have a different nutrient profile. So why are 50% latest research, according to one of my podcast guests, Dr. Lee Aaron Keneally, 1 out of 2 people are going to end up with cancer in our country. What? I mean, those are horrible numbers. So what can we do if the thing we do every day, 3 to 4 times a day, is eating? What if we change some elements of that? Could we be healthier?
I mean, yes, I certainly believe so.
Yes, I certainly believe so too. And, I don't think eating so much corn, which if you think about it, corn, high fructose corn syrup, which is in everything from hamburger buns at, you name it, fast food, to the, Coke you're drinking and this and that and the other thing, we're eating a lot of corn.
For sure. Or animals that are also eating corn.
Exactly right.
Yes.
Exactly right. Yeah, because it's cheap.
Right. It's a cheap source of carbohydrates.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. So, going back to your why, how's your wife doing today?
She's really good. So the elimination diets that she went on. So an elimination diet is where you eliminate a whole bunch of foods. So things that might inflame the body. And then you add them back in and you see how your body reacts. And so when she added dairy back in, so she eliminated all of these for, 60 days. And then you add something in and then you rest for a few days and then you add something else back in. When she added dairy back in, her tongue swelled up. When she added gluten back in, she got a rash all over her body. And so she stopped eating gluten and dairy. So now she's gluten and dairy free. We have 3 daughters. We generally try to avoid gluten and dairy with them. Gluten, if it's organic, is like kind of okay, but otherwise, not really. Yeah. So, I mean, and her, because she's on a gluten, dairy free, healthy meat diet, her levels. So, you have to like watch this TSH level. Her levels have been normalized, and she's feeling much healthier, much more energy, all of that.
So, changing her diet, eating a lot more high quality, probably in every category of foods, but certainly with her animal protein, really made a big difference for her.
I don't know anybody who has changed their diet to eating cleaner and it hasn't made a difference. Whether it's weight loss, right, which is like kind of the easy one, more energy, better sleep. There are so many benefits to cleaning up your diet and focusing on healthy, nutritious food.
Again, it's the one thing we do multiple times per day. And you can't exercise your way out of a poor diet.
Right.
Yeah, it just doesn't work that way. So I'm glad she's doing better. Yeah, it sounds like your why for her has turned into this, amazing business that I get to benefit from and my listeners get to benefit from. And I love the emphasis on grass-fed, free range. And I live in Seattle, so I eat a lot of fish. And I'd love to hear more about some of your fisheries that you work with in Alaska, which is mainly sockeye salmon. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Out of Alaska, we do halibut, sockeye salmon, sablefish, which is black cod, also known as butterfish, which is like the best.
And it's also, according to Dr. Andrew Weil, it's at the very top of his anti-inflammatory diet as far as fish.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, sablefish is
amazing.
It's probably my favorite. Yeah, I love that.
Mine too. So I just went up to Alaska. We participated in the Salmon Run, which is a 6 to 8 week period where all of the sockeye salmon for the entire year are caught. So the salmon essentially are born in a river, and then they swim up slightly upstream the river to a lake where they live for the first 2 years. And then they swim down the river into the ocean where their system gets completely shocked because they go from fresh water to salt water. So they basically are comatose for a week. Then they revive and they spend about 2 years eating shrimp. Then they swim back up the same river and almost to the same spot that they were born to spawn. That's the salmon swimming upstream and over waterfalls and whatever. And they spawn and then die. They lay about 4,000 eggs, about 10% of them survive. So the approach that people took to Alaskan salmon and Seattle salmon Pacific Northwest salmon for many, many generations was to overfish, right? So it's like, let's just put a massive net across the river and catch every damn salmon. And then just have that net go directly to the cannery and make our, canned salmon and filleted salmon. That was the model. When Alaska really, it took until the late 1900s for Alaska Fish and Game to be established and for people to really be thinking about long-term sustainability. So take what you can this year, but also make sure there's enough for next year.
What a concept.
And the year after.
What a concept. Wow.
Leave some for your children. And so, the sockeye salmon run has been increasing on an annual basis, meaning the number of fish going in is increasing. So we go and first of all, we spent time with Fish and Game. So what they do is they have a counting tower, like 7 miles up the river. So it's salmon that have swum 7 miles up. And there's somebody who goes up there every hour and spends like two to 3 minutes counting how many salmon pass this pad, like visually, like, oh, there's one, there's two, there's three. And I went up there after 2 minutes. I was like, I saw 8. He's like, I saw 23. You are much better at this than I am.
That's pretty great.
So, and what happens is the counting tower makes an estimation of how many salmon per hour are flowing through. And once they feel like they have enough salmon flowing through, which is called escapement, they say, okay, now you can fish. And then there's all these fishing boats that are out there and they're all regulated. They're all the same, same boat. It's a steel hulled boat, 28 feet long, 3 crew members, a net that goes a quarter of a mile. And they all fish in these spots and try to pull up fish in these nets. And so everything has been built around sustainability. Everything has been built around like, let's not take everything this year because that's not sustainable. And so it's this real model of sustainable fishing. One of the challenges that I have in this business is wild caught. When you think about wild caught, most people are like, oh, I want wild caught. Like I want something that's not farmed because there's a whole bunch of problems with farm raised seafood. I want it to be wild. Well, the problem with that is a lot of companies' approach to wild catching for your benefit is to just destroy the ocean, which is happening more and more. Yeah, they just yank out everything. And so wild caught is actually not enough. What you want is wild caught plus some sort of sustainable certification so that you know that there's like a limit to what they're catching, or they're letting some through and then catching the rest, or they're really thinking about the long-term sustainability of the fisheries. Without that, what's happening is, companies are just going to try to rip out as much salmon as possible and make as much money this year and not worry about the long-term effects.
Wow, really short-term thinking.
Yeah.
They're just thinking about right now.
That's capitalism for you. Yep.
It is. It's bad capitalism for you.
That's right.
That is so interesting. Okay, so when we're looking at labels and we see wild caught, which is what I'm looking for, is there normally on a label that says, wild caught and sustainably fished?
I mean, first of all, I would just suggest you go to ButcherBox.com because we obsess about these things. So, but absent that, so something like the Marine Stewardship Council will have some sort of sustainability rating, and then you can like go and learn more about it. But yes, wild caught without sustainable. And also keep in mind, they can just put on the package, sustainably harvested. That doesn't actually mean anything. Like you need to actually do your research and figure out like, where is this product coming from? And, what we think, one of the things that our brand stands for is we obsess about like the details. Like we're on the ground. I'm on the ground at the plants, at the farms, like on the fishing boat, like catching fish myself and like, oh, okay, I get this. And we do that as a promise to the customer that we are obsessed about delivering them the best possible product. And so we want a brand that stands for that. What we want is when you see ButcherBox, you're like, yeah, I know that they went to the highest degree possible to get the best possible product for me.
Right. And I think, we're all super busy. And I ask my listeners to do a lot of reading when they go to the supermarket or the farmer's market or wherever they're shopping. And if I know that ButcherBox has such a high standard, then I can just check that box because I know you've already done it.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. And when I found out that, your farmers and the people who are fishing, that just made me so happy and relaxed, because I'll admit I fall for marketing, and the marketing's on the front of the package and the truth is usually, hopefully, on the back. And when I see sustainably harvest, I like to just assume maybe that's my little halo, my little bubble I live in. I just want to believe that that's doing better things for the planet. And if it's doing better things for the planet, it's going to be doing better things for my body.
Unfortunately, the approach of some in the meat space is like, oh, people care about pasture raised. People care about grass fed. People care about sustainably harvested. Let's just put that on the label, or let's put something that appears to be sustainably harvested and not make the claim, but make the claim and put a green leaf on it. And this is what we call greenwashing. And there's been a tremendous amount of greenwashing of the meat case, where it's really confusing. And the average American spends, it's something like 13 seconds in front of the meat case before making a buying decision. So they're not spending any time actually able to read labels or what have you. So,
that is really at 13 seconds at the meat case. Huh. Okay. And greenwashing. I know that, we're about to enter Breast Cancer Awareness Month for October, and there's a lot of pink washing that goes on where you just put a pink ribbon on that. People think, wow, I am donating toward breast cancer research. No, it's just a pink ribbon. It means absolutely nothing. So it sounds like in the meat industry, same thing with the greenwashing.
Yeah, for sure. There's people are just doing what they think the customer is looking for, but not actually, it's this short-term thinking mindset. It's like, it's a lot harder to actually try to build a system that is going to make demonstrable change. And there are very few companies out there that are looking to do that.
Are you surprised by how much people care about where their animal protein comes from?
Not really, because I do. I mean, what we see is there's an awakening that happens. And that could be a heart attack. It could be you were following elimination diet or a Whole30 diet. It could be you got cancer. It could be your spouse got cancer. It's some sort of awakening. So when I talked earlier about my wife and thyroid condition, elimination diet, we all of a sudden were like, grass-fed beef, what's that? And then between Michael Pollan, the book Omnivore's Dilemma, and a whole bunch of, articles and stuff online, we're like, holy cow, how, first of all, how do we not know about this? And secondly, why would we ever eat any other way? And at that moment, that awakening moment, that's when we come in, right? And it's like, hey, you're probably really confused. There's a lot of stuff to learn all of a sudden. We can help. If you buy from us, we've gone through the trade-offs. And so now I'm not surprised, because the meat system in this country is really broken. And I think people are voting with their stomachs, and they're saying well, I want something different. And the more people that make the decision to eat sustainably harvested seafood and grass-fed beef and animals that were raised better, more conscientiously, the more people that make that decision, the bigger that piece of the industry gets, the cheaper it gets, the more efficient it gets, and the more we can change the meat system in this country.
Let's talk about change and let's talk about dollars. I mentioned I grew up on a farm, and so I'm used to eating a lot of animal protein, but I was always used to eating super high quality animal protein. And I believe that when it's super high quality like that, you just end up naturally eating a little bit less. You don't need a 1 pound ribeye on your plate. Not that that's not fun every now and then, but I'm also a big believer in plant-based. I guess I'm an enigma, because I love plant-based, but I love super high quality animal protein. And could we ever end up moving to a model where we just have really high quality animal protein, we eat a little bit less, and we have a ton of vegetables and a little bit of complex carbs?
If I were a braver marketer, I would launch a campaign that's something like "Eat less meat, but make sure it's good."
And that is actually my message. That is my message.
That is the message, I think.
It is the message. It's good for you, good for the planet, good for the animal. And so it's almost like high quality animal protein could be a little bit of a side dish.
Yeah. And I think that is a lot of so when we started in 2015, we kind of rode the wave of paleo and Whole30 and clean eating. And a lot of those people have moved into I think as Mark Hyman calls it, the pegan diet, which is a lot more vegetables and meat as a side dish. Meat doesn't have to be the only thing you're eating. It really can be an accompaniment. You do need to eat a lot of meat for protein, for essential amino acids, but it certainly, hardly anyone eats a 1 pound ribeye anymore. Even at the steakhouses, like that, people aren't really ordering that like they used to.
So, Mike, just final question. You got 3 kids. You're running a business. You said that was much bigger than you ever expected it to be. What do you do every day to stay healthy, mentally and physically?
All right. I do a lot. So, I'm currently doing a 75 hard, which is a 75-day stretch of no alcohol, following a strict diet, working out twice a day, drinking a gallon of water. So I'm almost constantly doing some sort of thing like that, where I'm like really dialed in terms of what I'm doing. I appreciate a life of discipline. So that's kind of physically. I like to do, although this is now pretty stereotypical, but I do like to do like cold plunges. Those are pretty awesome. There's nothing nothing clears the mind more than sitting in freezing cold water. There's there's like, oh, chatter,
It's so
like
true.
all these things that went wrong, and you sit
so
and it's just like, vroom. You're just like, oh my God, I'm going to die if I stay in here. So
yeah. Yeah.
And I got to breathe. So I do that.
And I got to breathe.
I'm part of several, one in particular, I'm part of a group called YPO, which is like a forum for other, young presidents organizations. It's a forum for other people who
young
like run companies, and really good to be able to share the life's experiences. One of the things they talk about is like, if life's experiences are on a bell curve of really great and really bad, oftentimes the tails, like the best stuff and the worst stuff, you don't talk about with anybody, including like your spouse, your family. Like, there are things that you can't reveal to anybody, and that group is basically like, that's what they're looking for you to talk about. It's like just that stuff. No one cares about like the normal stuff. It's like, get rid of the stuff that's within you. I'm a big believer in guided journeys. Medicated journeys. I think that, in terms of helping heal past traumas or past whatever, that's been, at least for me and for others I've seen, has been really helpful. And then, diet-wise, I'm definitely very meat forward. Part of that is I get my meat for free. So
that really does help. You've got a wide variety to choose from.
That's right. And I always have to sample something. It's like, oh, you got to try this. Like, right. It's like, oh, shoot, I have to try that. Rats. Plenty of water. I try to eat limited carbs, protein. And then finally, I try to do some sort of mindfulness thing every day. What I am currently focused on is trying to surrender to my heart. So less mind, more heart. So just like trying to figure out what my heart is trying to tell me versus, staying up here in my mind.
It's good. That sounds like it's a place of freedom.
It is. Yes. If only we could listen to our hearts instead of,
If only. I think the world would be a much different place if we could just get out of our head and, stay heart focused.
Yeah. So, yes, the world would be a much better place, but I'll start with myself. I'll start in my own backyard and try to make myself a better place.
That's what I always say to myself often. I can only control my own yard. But when people look in my yard, they say, wow, that's an inspiration. Yeah. Well, Mike, oh my goodness. Thank you so much for coming on Why Did I Get Cancer? I've already been such a huge fan of ButcherBox for so long. And now I feel like I'm armed with even more information about just how hard you guys try and how diligent you are to make meat better for us to consume. But again, as a former farmer, you care about the farmer and you care about them making a living. And that's really important to me.
Well, this was a pleasure. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good. Well, thanks for coming on the show. I think you all know how much I love ButcherBox. Probably the biggest driver for me is the quality. And I love that ButcherBox focuses on small family fisheries, so they know who's fishing for the sockeye salmon. And they also focus on small family ranches where, again, they visit these ranches and they know that these animals are being treated humanely. And that is probably my biggest driver. I also had many of you reach out to me and tell me, hey, I want to try ButcherBox, but I don't want to commit to a full year. So I have great news for you. You can go ahead and use my code and sign up for as long as you want. Of course, right now we're doing the free Bison in every box, and you still get the free Bison in every box and $20 off of your first box. So all you have to do is go to butcherbox.com/Enos and then use the code Enos. And then you're going to get $20 off of your first order and then free Bison in every box for up to a year. This is a great opportunity to just try out ButcherBox without having to commit to 12 months. I have to tell you, I get so excited when I get that delivery box at my front door because I know it's going to be incredibly high quality protein that honestly I can't get at any supermarkets near my home. So give ButcherBox a try. I think you'll love them. Thank you for joining me today on the Why Did I Get Cancer podcast. I've got my shopping guide for all of my cancer self-care items in the show notes, along with information about today's guest and our show sponsors. And don't forget to subscribe to my podcast so you never miss an episode. Keep in mind, I'm not a doctor. I'm just a gal that got diagnosed with cancer and wanted answers. If you need medical advice, please be sure to consult with a medical professional. And thank you for listening.